Hello, class. So today I'm demonstrating my Cycle 4 project and going to explain the code process that I use. So what I created for this project is a automated RuneScape bot. So as a child, I've played this online game since I was a kid, and there's a big community of people who use these things, which are called bots. So basically what a bot does is there's a set of skills that the goal of the game is to max out the level of your skills to 99. So some people don't always find the time to be able to train as much as they want, so they use these things called bot scripts. And what it essentially does is you don't even have to be on your computer, and this bot will train the skill for you and do everything for you. So today right now I'll demonstrate what it does. So let's go into the start script folders, woodcutting, because I made a woodcutting bot, and this is the bot that I created. So once I hit start, interface pops up that asks you which tree you would like to cut, and depending on which one, the bot will do different things. So if I cut a regular tree, it'll bring me over to this area. If I select oak tree, it'll bring me down on this mini map a little lower than that. And I'll demonstrate both of those. So for the first one, I'll do the tree. And I wanted to add an implement to either drop or bank the logs, but I was only able to get the bank function, so these buttons are obsolete. So once I hit the start script, it'll control my mouse for me, click over to the area I selected, which contains the trees that I want them to cut. And then from there, it'll just click on the closest tree that is selected, and then boom, that's all it does. It's a very simple idea behind it, because it's just a test of conditions to whether you're actively cutting a tree, or say your inventory is full and you need to bank. It's basically just testing different conditions to whether they're true in the end. So I'll let this run and show you. I filled up the inventory so it doesn't take as long to cut all the logs and bank everything, so you'll get a good idea of how it functions. But so once it cuts down the tree, it goes right to the next one that's closest, and I'll explain that once I get into the code. I just feel like if you don't know what the game is, it's better to look at it and see what it does, and then I'll get into the code afterwards. Because as you can see, the red X is the controlled mouse by the Tribot user interface, and once the inventory is full over here, there's no more space, it goes into the bank. It'll click on the bank, either the bank booth or the teller. It'll bank the logs, but it doesn't bank the axe. So, because that's important, you can't cut a tree without the axe, so I had to add a method into that to keep the axe in the inventory. So let's rerun this script and let's try oak tree. So now in order to cut an oak tree, you need 15 wood cutting, which is the level I got using the bot, so that I can show you at least the multiple things you can do with it. So once it comes over here, it does the same thing as you would a regular tree. It finds the closest oak tree, and then it just cuts it and waits for you to be finished. So as you can see, these trees act a little differently, as in they stack logs. It's not one log per tree, you can get multiple, so it takes a little longer. Or other people can cut it down in that case, and I don't get anything. So we'll wait a second and see how this goes. So there, I cut my first oak log, and then it'll continue to go until the inventory is full. Once the inventory is full, it'll run back to the bank space over here, bank all the logs, and then just come right back and continue to cut. So it's a looping process that continues over and over until you literally hit stop on the bot. So that's the demonstration for it. Let me get into the code. Alright, so this just happened today. Everything in this code has no errors. I don't know what the hell happened. I just opened it and did nothing, and everything just turned red, so it scared me, but everything works the way it should in this. So let me jump into the tree cutter function and the ability to cut the regular tree. So I'll explain this. So each side, or if you look on the sidebar, it contains different classes. I've created a class for each function, so the regular tree and the banker or banking for the regular tree logs, and then I did one both separate for the oak and then a different tree which was willow, and then yew trees, which I wasn't able to demonstrate because the bot that I created isn't very anti-ban friendly, so I've had a couple accounts get banned so far using this because this doesn't go by their rules of playing the game, so it's a big issue in the community. But I just did this as a fun tester because I've always wanted to make one and I've always thought of doing it. So this was just a fun experiment for me. So this tree cutter class is the function for the regular tree selection. So oak cutter and tree cutter are basically the same, just different IDs for the tree to find, and that's about it. So for this first thing, I had to create a Boolean method that returns if the player is in the selected tree location. So this was part of the API that let me back up. So in order to create this code, I had to use this Tribot API, which is basically an API of all the functions that you would need to interact with the game in different ways. So this RS area is part of the API that allows you to select a certain area of tiles within the game. So each step you take is a different tile. So it's very square based game. So it gives you the area of where the tree is or where the trees are located, so that the bot knows where to run to in order to cut the tree. So for this first one, it's a method that returns a Boolean to whether the character's current position is within the specified tiles up here, and then returns true if it is, false if it isn't, and we use that later on to test what action the bot needs to perform, and then a method to see whether the bot is cutting the log. So each animation of the person or the character does, so say it's running, it'll have a set number to it to where it identifies that it's doing a running animation, but if it's standing still, the player animation is -1, so it's not doing anything. So that's why it tests if it's greater than 0. Oh, whoops. So if it is greater than 0, then it is doing the animation that we want it to. So that's what that Boolean does, or that's what that method does. So then here is the cutting activity. I guess I should explain this one first because the cutting activity implements this one. So this method right here is so let me run through it quickly. First, it gets an array of trees that are it gets an array of objects within 10 tiles of the player's location with the name attached to it of tree. And so once it does that, it tests to make sure that it was able to find tree values within the area. And if it does, then it selects the first tree that it found, which would be the closest one to you, to just a temporary value tree. And this right here is a test to make sure that the value isn't null, because if it's not there, then it returns a null pointer exception, so it wouldn't allow the code to work properly. And then this test, if the tree is on screen, then it's a function from the API called .click that selects the chop down option, which is basically cutting the tree, and then it actually does that function in the same time as returning the Boolean true. And if it's not on screen, then it'll walk to the area so it can cut the tree. And so now to get into this method, the cutting activity, so the first thing it does, it checks that it's at the tree location, which was specified up here. So if it's within these tiles, then it'll go into this set of code. But if it doesn't, then it walks blindly to a random tile within the selected area. And then this method is also part of the API, and it's a condition to where if this condition is true, so if the person is moving, then it'll wait a random amount of seconds between 12 and 16. So these values are in milliseconds, so 12,000 milliseconds would be 12 seconds. And then once it waits, and so it waits until the player stops moving, and then it reruns through the code to check if it's at the location. If it's not in the location, then it clicks again and then goes elsewhere. And then so now getting into the function of it, it checks to see if the player's animation is -1, which would be it not moving. So if the player is at the tree location and is not moving, then it goes into the cut tree function. So if it's able to find trees and then actually able to cut it, then it'll go into the next step of the if function, and it goes into another timing.wait condition. So it waits until the condition doing activity. So if the person is doing an activity rather than just standing there, it'll go into that, or it'll wait until that condition's done and then wait 4 to 5 seconds to then continue on and click on to another thing. And that is about it for the cutter function. So now let's look into the banking class. So the variables I needed for this were the bank location, which was a new RuneScape area, and the IDs of the axes used to woodcut. So there's, I want to say like 6 of them, but I only used the 5, or I used the 6 main ones. So there's bronze, iron, steel, black, mithril, adamant, and rune. So I added those to the function so that it tests later on to make sure that the person doesn't, or the bot doesn't bank the axe as well as the logs. And so this is another boolean to test to see if the player's at the bank, like in the tree cutter function. And then so this banking activity is what actually banks the logs, but it implements this method, so I'll explain this first. So this method, it banks all the logs if the inventory is, or if the bank is open, and if it isn't open, then it opens the bank for you. So to look into it, if the bank screen is open, then it goes into the code. If it's not open, then it's another wait condition until it opens the bank, and then waits 5 to 8 seconds to loop back through and to retest it again. So if the bank screen is open now, which it should be, the banking dot deposits all except axes. It tests to see if it is able to bank all the logs and axes, and if it is, then the timing dot wait condition and bank checker wait condition until the bank checker function or condition is false, and then once it is, then it'll wait 5 to 8 seconds until continuing on to the next part, which will be used in the main function. So within this, I had to create 2 conditions for the wait condition function. So the first one I had to do was the open bank. So this returns a condition of whether the bank is being open or not. And then bank checker. So this is another condition to check if it's true to whether the logs have been banked. And if the inventory doesn't have logs left, then it'll continue on. And so here's a conditions page that I created for the main function. So when I first researched this project, I found out that I had to basically create a condition to whether each activity is happening. So if he's chopping, then do this. If he's banking, do this. If he's not chopping, do this. Like,